From the dusty records of my archive comes a true tragedy shrouded in fog and fear. In a quiet southern town, a beloved husband set out on a routine duck hunting trip and vanished without a trace. The swamp itself seemed to swallow him whole. Tonight's tale, though cloaked in new names, is loosely inspired by the real-life disappearance of Florida hunter Mike Williams, a case where a quiet lake and a perfect marriage hid something far more sinister. His mysterious disappearance baffled investigators and chilled the community. Whispers of hungry alligators and betrayal began to ripple through the muddy waters. Tonight, I, the Ageless Archivist, invite you to uncover the sinister secret that lay beneath the surface of Palmetto Lake. This is a tale of deceit, devotion, and a swamp that refused to keep its dead. Martin Hale prepared for a solo duck hunting trip. He kissed his wife Claire goodbye as she slept, hitched up his small boat, and drove off into the darkness. Martin was an avid outdoorsman. This trip to Palmetto Lake was supposed to be routine, just another hunt at his favorite spot. In the pale dawn light, Martin's boat cut through the misty waters of Palmetto Lake. Cypress trees loomed like silent sentinels in the haze. He was utterly alone with the reeds and the rising sun, unaware that these would be the last moments anyone would see him alive. The lake was calm, deceptively calm. But Martin never returned home. By noon, when he hadn't shown up for an anniversary lunch with Claire, alarm bells rang. Family and friends rushed to Palmetto Lake. They found Martin's truck still parked by the remote boat ramp, his empty trailer waiting. There was no sign of Martin, only silence and a creeping sense of dread. A search party was formed as daylight waned. Boats skated across the murky lake, volunteers shouting Martin's name into the endless swamp. The Florida wildlife officers joined in. Hours later, they made a discovery. Martin's hunting boat was found adrift in a tangle of weeds. Martin's boat was empty, abandoned in shallow water. His shotgun and a few duck decoys were still on board, untouched. There were no signs of struggle on the boat, no blood, no bullet holes, nothing to tell the tale of what happened. It was as if Martin had simply stepped off the boat and vanished into the depths. The search intensified. Divers plunged beneath the surface, scouring the lakebed for any trace of Martin. They battled thick weeds and silt in zero visibility, searching by feel in the cold, black water. On the shoreline, anxious rescuers combed through swamp grass and muck with poles. Yet after days of exhaustive searching, nothing was found. Not a body, not a scrap of clothing. Martin Hale had disappeared as completely as a stone in a bog. With no body recovered, speculation ran wild. Authorities floated a grim theory. Martin must have drowned and alligators devoured his remains. The lake and surrounding wetlands were known to hide big gators. If Martin had fallen overboard and drowned, his body could have attracted them. It was a horrific thought, but it seemed to be the only explanation for a man vanishing without a trace. Still, some locals frowned at the Alligator Theory. Old-timers noted that in the chill of December, alligators are sluggish, barely feeding, and never before had Palmetto Lake failed to give up a drowning victim's body. It was as if something, or someone, didn't want Martin's body found. Quiet doubts began to take root even as the official search was winding down. 6 months passed. The lake eventually yielded a strange clue. Martin's camo waders and hunting jackets surfaced, floating eerily in a grassy cove. His fishing license was still tucked in the jacket pocket. The discovery was odd. The gear was in relatively good condition, not shredded by gators as one might expect. But it was enough for the courts. On the petition of Claire, Martin's widow, he was finally declared legally dead. Martin's family and friends mourned him in a somber memorial service, despite the gnawing lack of closure. Claire wept softly in the front pew, supported by Martin's best friend, Paul. The community tried to move on, accepting Martin Hale's death as a tragic accident. Officially, the case was closed. Unofficially, though, whispers had already begun. Not long after Martin was declared dead, tongues began to wag. Claire's life had taken a surprising turn. She found comfort in the arms of Paul, the very friend who had helped search for her husband. Within a few short years, Claire and Paul married each other. To the outside world, they seemed a couple finding love after tragedy. But for those who remembered Martin, this development was unsettling. Helen Hale, Martin's mother, never believed the convenient conclusion that her son was simply swallowed by the swamp. From day one, her gut screamed that something was wrong. Martin was a strong swimmer and careful hunter. To her, the alligator story felt like a cover-up. Helen refused to let the case die with her son. Every day, she wrote letters to authorities, urging them to dig deeper, to find out what really happened at Palmetto Lake. Helen's persistence paid off. 4 years after the disappearance, the state police reopened the case. Detectives pored over the file with fresh eyes. They noticed inconsistencies that had been glossed over. For one, those alligators that were blamed don't feed in winter's cold, a fact that cast doubt on the idea that Martin's body had been devoured. And why did his intact jacket and waders suddenly turn up months later, as if planted? Suspicion quietly shifted from the swamp to the people around Martin. Unfortunately, time was not on the investigators' side. The lake had long given up what little evidence it held. The initial search area was never treated as a crime scene, so any clues were lost to nature. Leads were scarce, and witnesses had nothing new to offer. After months of effort, the reopened investigation hit a dead end. Officially, nothing criminal could be proven. Frustrated authorities closed the case again. But Helen Hale would not quit, even as years turned into a decade. Back in town, Martin's disappearance became local legend. Around campfires and kitchen tables, people swapped theories in hushed tones. Some spoke of greed and murder, though none dared accuse openly without proof. Others whispered a spookier tale. Martin's restless spirit haunted Palmetto Lake. Fishermen swore they heard whispers over the water at dawn, calling for help. A couple of boaters claimed they'd seen a lone figure in camouflage standing in the fog among the cypress knees, only for it to vanish when approached. Martin Hale, they said, wanted the truth to be known. Claire and Paul never publicly acknowledged these ghostly rumors, but behind closed doors, guilt gnawed at them. In the dead of night, Paul often jolted awake from nightmares. In his dreams, he was back at the lake's edge, the mud sucking at his boots. A figure with pale, waterlogged skin would emerge from the black water, and Paul would wake up with Martin's name on his lips. The weight of a terrible secret lay heavy on his chest, even as he tried to pretend that life had moved on. Years rolled by. Palmetto Lake remained quiet, and Martin's story was left unsolved but not forgotten. Claire and Paul lived outwardly ordinary lives in the community, raising Martin's daughter and trying to maintain an air of normalcy. Helen Hale continued to fight for her son, though her hair had turned gray with time. 17 years passed with no justice, but fate, or perhaps Martin's unsettled spirit, was not finished with this story. By the late 2000s and 10s, cracks had formed in Claire and Paul's carefully crafted life. Their marriage deteriorated under the strain of secrets and suspicion. Claire had grown cold and distant, and Paul haunted and anxious, sensed that she might finally break. One fateful evening, an argument erupted. Claire announced she wanted out of the marriage, and out from under the shadow of Martin's ghost. For Paul, her words ignited pure panic. Fear took hold of Paul. He knew that if Claire left, she might spill everything about what truly happened to Martin. In a desperate frenzy, Paul decided to do the unthinkable. As Claire tried to drive away one night, Paul slipped into her car with a gun. He kidnapped his own wife, voice trembling as he begged and threatened her not to leave him and not to go to the police. The car disappeared into the darkness as old sins pushed the present to a breaking point. Claire's nightmare ended when she managed to calm Paul enough to stop at a convenience store, where she bolted out and screamed for help. Within minutes, police had swarmed. Paul was arrested at gunpoint, his carefully guarded normal life crumbling in an instant. The kidnapping made headlines, and at long last, the law's gaze returned to Martin Hale's disappearance. In the interrogation room, Paul realized the game was over. With nowhere left to run and facing decades behind bars, Paul's facade shattered. Perhaps it was the weight of guilt finally crushing him, or the eerie feeling that Martin himself was watching from beyond that one-way mirror. Paul began to speak, haltingly at first. Then in a rush of tears, he confessed the awful truth that Helen Hale had feared all along. Martin Hale's death was no accident. On that December morning in 2000, Paul had secretly accompanied Martin on the hunting trip. Under the guise of friendship, he lured Martin to a secluded cove. Their plan, Paul and Claire's plan, was to stage a tragic mishap. Paul meant to push Martin overboard into the chilly water, expecting him to drown swiftly in the weight of his water-filled waders. But Martin didn't go under easily. Martin struggled desperately, flailing and calling out to his friend for help. When it became clear Martin might save himself, Paul made a ruthless choice. The muzzle flash lit the fog as he shot Martin at point-blank range. The swamp fell silent. Martin's life was snuffed out by the one person he had trusted like a brother. To hide the murder, Paul hauled Martin's body into a patch of swampy mud. He dragged the corpse far into the reeds under cover of those ancient cypress trees. In the muck of the lake's edge, he dug a shallow grave, pressing Martin's body down among tangling roots and slime. The dark waters and mud became Martin's unmarked tomb, and the lake fell quiet once more. Paul then staged the scene. He left Martin's boat adrift, engine off, and carefully tossed some of Martin's gear into the water to make it look like an accident. He kept Martin's disappearance quiet until noon, ensuring Claire had an alibi at home. They nearly got away with it. The alligator story, the planted waders and jacket, it had all been part of their cover-up to cash in on Martin's life insurance and be together. Thanks to Paul's confession, authorities finally knew where to look. 17 years after he was killed, Martin's remains were dug out from the mire near that very cove on Palmetto Lake. The bones told the tale, evidence of a shotgun blast to the head that a gator could have done. The truth, long buried in mud and lies, had at last been pulled into the light. In the aftermath, Claire Hale was arrested as the architect of the plot. Investigators uncovered how she and Paul had been having an affair and scheming for months. Greed had been their motive. Love twisted by the lure of a hefty insurance payout. Justice finally knocked at Claire's door, and she went to trial to answer for her role in Martin's murder. Nearly 2 decades after Martin's murder, justice was served. Facing overwhelming evidence and Paul's damning testimony, Claire was found guilty of conspiracy to murder. She would spend decades behind bars. Paul, having confessed and cooperated, received a lengthy prison term as well, though spared the harshest sentence due to his confession. The deadly lovers had turned on each other, and the pact of silence was broken at last. The long mystery of Martin Hale's disappearance was finally resolved. His mother, Helen, at last knew the truth and could give her son a proper burial, ending years of uncertainty. The swamp that had held Martin's body so long had given up its secret, and with it, perhaps, Martin's restless spirit found peace. In Palmetto Lake's still waters, there are no more whispers of ghosts, only the lesson that even the deepest secrets eventually rise to the surface. As the archivist of this ageless collection of horrors and hopes, I close the file on this case. The truth, once submerged in darkness, has emerged into the light. And the tale of Martin Hale stands as a stark reminder. Evil may hide, but it cannot escape time.